Good morning, everybody, and thank you for being here. So I'm going to be talking today to you about our major project at Climate Healers, which is Vegan World 2026. We call this the moonshot of our generation, because every generation has one of these major projects that we undertake, and we try to hit it, right? And this is the moonshot of our generation compared to what people were doing in the 60s. Now, Vegan World 2026 sounds like a massive transformation in human society, right? And how do we achieve that? How do we change the world? Now, when I started working on the environment back in 2005, I started studying the literature, and I came across this book by Anthony DeMello. It's called Awareness. And in which he said something that struck me, that has stuck with me forever since he said that. He said the world does not need to be changed. It needs to be understood. And when you understand the world, you will transform automatically and effortlessly, and the world will change with you. So it puts the onus on the individual to make the transformation, as opposed to trying to change the whole world, right? So I took that to heart, and I started looking into what can I do in my life to address what I was seeing in the world around me, and what is it about the world that I need to understand. Now, Tracy Martin has written that change is inevitable, but transformation is intentional. She makes a distinction between change and transformation. And this photograph shows a fence that was built right down the middle of this forest to prevent domestic animals from going to the right of the fence. So they are only allowed to graze on the left of the fence. So this was a transformation that was undertaken by the villagers here. And you see the forest just blooming to the right of the fence. So I took a look at this in 2008, and I immediately went vegan on the spot, because I realized it was my consumption of dairy and animal foods that was causing the destruction of the planet, the destruction of the forest. At least that was the conclusion I reached right away. So that is what I refer to as transformation. Now, the change is inevitable, meaning eventually the earth is going to look like this, whether we like it or not. It's going to look like what's on the right-hand side of the fence. The only difference is whether we are part of it or not. Okay, and it may take 1,000,000 years for the earth to come back to this green state. So that is the decision that we have to make right now. Now, this was in 2008, December. I went vegan. And in 2009, I say that I reached both the height and the depths of my emotional being. I felt a sense of perfection in this sanctuary that I went to in the Western Ghats of India. And this sanctuary, you can see how beautiful it is. I felt like everything was in its place and everything was perfect, exactly as it should be. It was so full of life that at night I could not even hear my sister talk. There was such a loud din of insects and animals in this forest. And it was started by a couple from New Jersey who went to India and created this sanctuary. So I asked Pamela the next morning, how did you make this happen? And she said, oh, we did nothing. We just came and bought this coffee plantation, and we tore down the fences and gave it back to the animals. And the animals did everything. And I said, what? That's all you have to do? Just give it back to the animals and the forest comes back? She said, well, we had to do one more thing. We had to patrol the land and make sure that no human being comes inside. And at that point, I felt really small. I felt as if I don't even belong in my own home, because I was born in this forest, just 200 miles away from where I was standing. So I felt so depressed when I came back home. And I thought that what can I do as one person, right? If we have to patrol the land and make sure that no human being comes inside, how are we going to accommodate 7.8 billion human beings on this planet? So I was, thinking about this and wondering why we behave this way, why we are the only species that doesn't belong, whereas every other species just lives and the planet thrives. And then the next year, my granddaughter was born. So she was born in 2010, and I discovered the divine feminine in her. So I held her in my arms for the first time when she was a month old, and she looked up at me and she smiled. And when she smiled, she convinced me that she belongs exactly as she is, and that we all must belong exactly as we are, and that we are no different from every other animal on the planet. Just like every other animal just lives and the planet thrives, we also must just live and the planet thrives. So there is something about our story that we are not telling correctly. Okay, so that's what she convinced me. So they say when the student is ready, the right teacher will come. And so she's been my teacher ever since then, because we raised her a vegan. And one of the advantages when you raise a child vegan is that that child sees violence in everything around us. And she was pointing it out to me. And I had closed my eyes to some of this violence. And so she opened my eyes to a lot of these things. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that further down the talk. So anyway, this to me was a major aha moment in my life. She literally turned my head around 180 degrees and told me to look at things as if we belong exactly as we are and that we are not telling the right story. So that started a journey, okay, for me. So I use the analogy of Michelangelo carving David, sculpting David. So imagine that after sculpting David, you discover Michelangelo, banging his chisel into his stomach with his hammer and trying to kill himself. And you stop him and you say, why are you doing this? Why are you trying to kill yourself? And he says, look at the mess I've made with the pieces of marble on the floor. How am I going to clean that up with a hammer and a chisel? Wouldn't you tell him, hey, you can use a different set of tools and you can clean up the mess you've made, and then we can all enjoy the David you have created? That's exactly what the animals are trying to tell us right now. We have done something amazing, but in the process, we have made a huge mess. And the animals are trying to wake us up and saying, you have done something good. Okay, just don't get depressed. Don't try to kill yourself off. Because when you're trying to kill yourself off, you're going to kill all of us too. So that's the message they're trying to send to us. This message of preventing Michelangelo from committing suicide after sculpting David. Because, in the UN, we talk about 3 major environmental problems. So if you want to focus on the marble shards, we have to understand what that is and see how we need to clean that up, right? So the 3 major environmental problems that the UN has identified is biodiversity loss, ecosystems collapse, and climate change. And what is the leading cause of biodiversity loss? It is animal agriculture. No question. Okay? So if you look at the biomass of wild animals from 10,000 years ago to 100,000 years ago, it was about 200 million tons. And human beings were a tiny little blip 10,000 years ago. And by 1970, we had wiped out 60% of the wild animals by weight. And our population had increased to the point where our biomass was equal to the biomass of all the wild animals that lived 10,000 years ago. And on top of that, our farmed animals were roughly double our weight, but they were eating about 3 times as much food as we eat. Now, what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is that we have genetically selected our farmed animals for their productivity. So we want them to put on muscle mass really fast. We want them to provide a lot of milk, for the food they eat, okay, for their weight. So just to give you an example, the average dairy cow weighs 1,700 pounds and eats 140 to 150 pounds of feed every day. Whereas the average white rhinoceros weighs 5,100 pounds, so triple the weight of the dairy cow, but eats only 120 pounds of grass a day. So you can see that the impact of the dairy cow is larger than the impact of the white rhinoceros. So literally the dairy cow's weight should be tripled if you want to compare it to the white rhinoceros. So that's what I mean by the equivalent biomass of farmed animals. This is the extra biomass that we need to take into account because our farmed animals are freaks, genetic freaks. That was in 1970. Between 1970 and 2016, we wiped out another 68% of the wild vertebrates in biomass. So which means they're down almost 90% from what they were 10,000 years ago. And this is 2016, mind you. This is before the Trump era began. Okay? And our population was almost 2.5 times the weight of all the wild animals that lived 10,000 years ago. But look at our farmed animals. I mean, they were the equivalent of 11 times the biomass of the wild animals that lived 10,000 years ago. So if you want to know what is the leading cause of biodiversity loss, it's right there. Get rid of the farmed animals and you will have plenty of land to bring back the wild animals, to at least return their biomass to at least 2010 levels very quickly, right? But we have to get rid of these farmed animals very quickly for us to do that. So the leading cause of biodiversity loss is animal agriculture. And the same with ecosystems collapse. The second
Dr. Rao, yeah. I want to just ask a quick clarifying question. So when we say get rid of the farmed animals, can you maybe clarify to them how that could be done? Because that could sound like, oh my goodness, just a mass rampage of just killing off these billions and billions of animals. What do we mean get rid of them, and how would that take place?
Well, the number one thing we need to do is to stop producing them, because these farmed animals are not having families, okay? So we are just artificially impregnating them. We have factories that produce these animals, these babies. So that's what I meant, okay? So I'll go into those details later.
Okay, thank you, thank you.
So the leading cause of ecosystems collapse is also domestic animals or farmed animals. And because they're using up so much of the land area of the planet, and they're literally, overgrazing our land and preventing the forest from coming back. So the third major environmental problem that the UN identified was climate change. So even though the UN identified 3 major environmental problems, we only hear about the third one. We don't hear too much about the first and the second in the media. Why is that? Because the third one can be framed as an economic growth story. Because they're focusing mainly on the burning machine as the leading cause of climate change. So the burning machine is the fossil fuels and industry. So we have the industrial burning is obviously causing a lot of greenhouse gases, and it's causing climate change. But the killing machine, which is the animal agriculture, is also a major reason for climate change. Okay, so as an engineer, I looked at these 2 machines and said, okay, both of these machines have to be shut down. There's no question. But how do we shut these 2 down? Okay, how do we shut these 2 down to reach a sustainable civilization? And that is an engineering question. And to answer that question, you have to understand what happens if you shut down the burning machine and what happens if you shut down the killing machine. So what happens to the heating of the planet? So what is happening today because of greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide, the excess carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is causing an extra 1.68 watts per square meter of heating on Earth. So literally it's like putting a 1.68 watt light bulb on every square meter of the Earth's surface. Okay, that's what we have done with our CO2 emissions. Now, with our other greenhouse gas emissions like methane, nitrous oxide, HFCs, and other greenhouse gases, we are adding another 1.7 watts per square meter of heating. Okay. But we are also we have also emitted a whole lot of aerosols, which are cooling gases, like sulfur dioxide, and they are cooling the Earth by 1.1 watt per square meter. So overall, we are heating up the Earth by 2.3 watts per square meter. Now, these numbers are all straight from the UN IPCC's fifth assessment report. Okay, scientists have figured this out. They've done these calculations, and I'm giving you their mean estimates. So now what happens when you shut down the burning machine? So you have to look at what is the annual emissions of the burning machine. So it's causing 87% of the CO2 emissions every year. And every year we are adding another 39 gigatons of CO2. And that is adding an extra 0.027 watts per square meter of heating. Now, we are also adding 23% of the methane from the burning machine, which is causing another 0.022 watts per square meter of heating. But we are almost 100% of the sulfur dioxide comes from the burning machine, which is actually cooling the Earth by negative 0.95 watts per square meter. So which means on an annual basis, the burning machine is contributing negative 0.9 watts of heating. So meaning it's actually cooling the Earth by 0.9 watts per square meter. Now, that doesn't mean this is a good thing to do, okay? It means that there is an incidental cooling that's happening because of the burning machine, but simultaneously all the CO2 that is adding is accumulating in the atmosphere, and that is constantly being increasing the heating. Okay, so it's not that the burning machine is a good thing to do, but it has this incidental cooling effect. So if you shut down the burning machine right away today, at the end of this year, you will have an additional 0.9 watts per square meter of heating on Earth, which is not a good thing to do. Now, if you shut down the killing machine is causing 29% of the CO2, which is 0.009 watts per square meter of heating. It's causing 37% of the methane. That's another 0.035 watts per square meter of heating. And it's using 37% of the land area of the planet. So if you shut down the killing machine, that land will start sucking down 34.5 gigatons of CO2 per year. Okay, that's an estimate that was in Searchinger's paper from 2019 for the carbon opportunity cost of animal agriculture. So that is an extra 0.06 watts per square meter of heating. So which means if you shut down the killing machine, you will cool the Earth by 0.1 watts per square meter per year. So as an engineer, if you ask me, how do you want to shut down these two machines? I would say first shut down the killing machine and then shut down 10% or 11% of the burning machine per year for the next 9 to 10 years. That's the way you would shut these two machines down. And when we do that, we won't be heating up the Earth any more than it is already heated up now. So the reason I'm pointing all this out is because these environmental problems are fairly easy to solve from a scientific perspective. And this is why Dr. Gus Speth, who is the founder of national NRDC, the Natural Resources Defense Council, and also he was the Dean of Environmental Studies at Yale University. He said, I used to think the top environmental problems were biodiversity loss, ecosystem collapse, and climate change. And I thought that with 30 years of good science, we could address those problems. But I was wrong. The top environmental problems are selfishness, greed, and apathy. And to deal with those, we need a spiritual and cultural transformation. And we scientists don't know how to do that. So he basically said, this is not a scientific problem at all. This is a spiritual and cultural problem. Okay? And selfishness, greed, and apathy, what are they? Why do we behave this way? You see, fortunately, I don't consider myself a scientist. I consider myself an engineer. And engineers are applied scientists. And as an engineer, I look at why are we behaving like this? Is there a game that we are playing that causes us to behave this way? And can we transform that game so that we automatically start becoming selfless and generous and activists? The opposite of these three. So that's what I set out to do. You see, in general, we know what we need to do. We know that there is a safe and just space for humanity. We don't have enough, we're not causing climate change. We are using the right amount of fresh water. We're using the right amount of nitrogen, phosphorus. So everything on Earth, all the Earth's environmental cycles are in balance and in harmony. And simultaneously, we have to make sure that everyone has food, water, good income, education. So all these social justice issues have to be met. So there is this safe and just space of humanity. Okay, Kate Raworth has beautifully illustrated that in her Donut Economics. And the UN has coded this, and 195 nations have signed it, saying that we are going to implement this. Okay, and they've coded it in these 17 Sustainable Development Goals. The first goal is no poverty, then zero hunger, good health and well-being. All these goals are good, right? Quality education, gender equality. So these are all good goals. I mean, we have set up all these goals, but then we added this goal number 8, which is decent work and economic growth. And you ask yourself, if we meet all these other goals, do we really care that the economy is growing? So why is everyone so focused on that? Even in this election, both sides are focused on growing the economy. In fact, they're all boasting about how much they're growing the economy more than the other guy, right? And this SDG 8 is a Trojan horse designed to maintain colonial slavery and infinite growth economics. Okay? And so this is how we are messing things up, because we have these 17 goals, but to meet these 17 goals, we are focusing just on goal number 8. Because that's the story we're being told. All the nations who have signed the 17 SDGs, they're all focusing on economic growth as the way to meet the other SDGs. And this narrow focus on SDG 8 is a suicidal focus. So we still haven't met all of our social justice issues. We have all these shortfalls. And simultaneously, we have caused a lot of climate change to happen. Biodiversity is, literally dying in front of our eyes. Land conversion is way beyond what we need to be doing. Nitrogen and phosphorus loading is way beyond. The chemical pollution, we haven't even measured it. We don't even know whether we are beyond or not. It's not yet quantified. So we have made a huge mess by just focusing on goal number 8 as the way to meet these other goals. Now, if I have an engineering team, okay, and they have these 17 goals, and the engineering team comes to me and says, to meet all these 17 goals, let's just focus on this one goal. They would get fired within a couple of weeks because it's stupid. You shouldn't do it this way, right? But why are we doing it this way? Because we are in the growth phase for humanity. We are in the caterpillar phase for humanity. Okay? So I use the metaphor of metamorphosis to understand why things don't need to be changed. They need to be understood. Okay? So to understand this, we have to understand that we are in the caterpillar phase. But in nature, the caterpillar stops growing at some point. At some point, the caterpillar says, I'm done with this. Right? So every species does this. Okay, like in the sanctuary, I was watching this elephant break branches of trees. And I asked Pamela, don't you think the elephant is being destructive to your sanctuary? She's breaking branches of trees. And Pamela's told me, no, she doesn't break every branch of every tree. She stops at some point. And wherever she broke the branches of trees, that's where the sunlight streams and nourishes the underbrush. So everything the elephant does, even though it may seem destructive, is actually constructive. So wherever the elephant trampled on bushes and killed the bushes, that's where new pathways are formed in the forest. And wherever the elephant dropped huge mounds of poop, that's where new jackfruit trees are born. So the elephant has no choice but to be constructive in the ecosystem. Okay? And this is why the elephant knows when to stop destroying the trees. Right? Just like the caterpillar knows when to stop growing. And so we are at that stage of humanity. Humanity is at the stage where we have finished something, we have finished our growth phase, and we haven't yet figured out what else we should be doing, right? So we need to tell a new story for humanity in which we belong exactly as we are. And in that story, we are saying that the role for human beings is to be the climate regulators or the thermostat species of planet Earth. And what do I mean by that? The Earth has gone through over 100 ice ages and warm periods in the last 3 million years. Okay, so this is the temperature curve of the Earth over the last 700,000 years. And this was obtained by drilling through the ice cores in the Arctic and in the Antarctic and slicing layer by layer and analyzing the oxygen molecules to figure out what the temperature was. And we know that the temperature was going up and down by up to 15 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, that's the difference between the high and the low. And it is during this era of these intense ice ages and warm periods that our species was born. And at first, we were born as a prey species. I mean, we don't run too fast, we don't climb trees too well, we don't smell too well, we don't see too well. We are very easy to catch for predators. So we were a prey to begin with, until we controlled fire. And we controlled fire about 500,000 years ago. And once we controlled fire, we started creating weapons and we started becoming more of a predator species. But it was only when we formed a partnership with wolves, with dogs, that we became a truly powerful predator species. And that happened in the previous ice age, 50,000 years ago. And then something magical happened in the current warm period. So we're in a warm period right now, right? So if you look at the current warm period, it looks exactly like the warm period that happened 3 ice ages ago. Except the temperature is coming down and then it kind of leveled off and started going up. So something crazy happened here. What was that? That's the human effect. So if you look at the methane and the carbon dioxide levels, they were following what was happening 3 ice ages ago until about 5,000 years ago, and then you see them taking off. So that's the human effect. And how did we do that? By doing agriculture, by cutting down forests, by raising animals. That's how we did this. Our ancestors did this. And by doing this, we prevented the Earth from going back to another ice age 5,000 years ago, and we kept the temperature constant. We kept the temperature constant until about 200 years ago, and then we discovered fossil fuels, and we dug them up and we burnt them, and we created our industrial infrastructure, and we raised the temperature by about 1 degree Celsius in the process. Now, in this graphics from William Radiman's book, he's assuming we're going to continue doing what we're doing. So which is continuing to keep burning fossil fuels until we exhaust them. And of course, we'll go extinct when we do that. And then the Earth will go back to another ice age. I said, that's a choice we have right now. Okay, we can choose to do what he's suggesting, or we can choose to go vegan, bring back the forests that we have lost, sequester the excess carbon in the atmosphere, and bring the temperature back to the thermostat setting and hand it over to the next generation and say, it's your job to maintain it here. That's the service that human beings are doing to every other species on this planet. We are the thermostat species. So that's a story in which we belong exactly as we are. And as part of that story, we are going to undergo this vegan metamorphosis. And vegan to me represents vitally engaged guardians of animals and nature. And the COVID-19 pandemic has put us in the chrysalis phase of the caterpillar. So we're in the chrysalis phase. We were caterpillars before, and now we're in the chrysalis phase. Of course, the first reaction to being in a chrysalis phase is to get angry, stock up on things, buy guns. It's the fear-based response. It's the pre-vegan response. And then once we recognize the wisdom in nature, accept that we are in the chrysalis phase, then relinquish control, learn that only the truth can save us. And when we learn the truth, we automatically go vegan. At least I did. I went vegan right away. And then we have to think about how we are going to become butterflies. So that's the third stage. See how best to serve others. What are your gifts? How can you contribute to nature? How do you adapt to the changes that are happening? Okay. So this is the process of vegan metamorphosis that we are undergoing right now. And to do this, we need to add an 18th goal in the UN Sustainable Development Goals. That is zero animal exploitation. This is the missing goal that is proposed by Claire Smith for successful implementation of all the other SDGs. It makes all the other SDGs easy to implement. Okay? If we have a goal of zero animal exploitation. So we had a proposal during our recent conference where we said replace UN SDG 8 with SDG 18 and adopt SDGs 1 through 7, 18, and 9 through 17 as the goals for Vegan World 2026. And it was unanimously accepted, okay, during the conference. So there was a total consensus on this. So this is part of the greatest transformation in human history that's happening right now. So our choice is either continue doing what we're doing and go extinct, or to transform. And to go from a system of normalized violence to a system of normal non-violence. And to transform ourselves from a predator species to a caretaker species. Remember, we're the only species that has transformed from a prey species to a predator species. So we know how to do this. We are a very adaptive species, okay? We have done this before. Right now, we call ourselves Homo sapiens sapiens, which is Latin for the wise hominid. So we call ourselves wise twice. And I've never really met a truly wise person who goes around calling himself wise, and that too twice. So we need to get over this narcissistic phase that we are in. And I suggest we call ourselves Homo ahimsa, which is a combination of a Latin word and a Sanskrit word. So which signifies that we are coming together as a species from around the world. And ahimsa means non-violent. So literally it is defining our character, not our characteristic. And there are 7 core shifts that we have identified that we need to do. Currently, we have all the speciesism, colonialism, racism, ableism, and patriarchy, this domination and oppression mindset. And to that, we need to transform to veganism and radical equality, or nonviolent and sacred relationships with each other and with life. We have a system that creates diseases and divisiveness among human beings in order to make money off of us. From that, we need to have a system that creates health and harmony and diversity among human beings. Currently, we make money by destroying and exploiting the planet. We need to transform that to regeneration and caretaking of the planet. From violence and cruelty to animals, to kindness and compassion for animals. From an egocentric culture of consumerism to an ecocentric culture of accountability. From a mindset of scarcity to a mindset of generosity. And from a profit-driven economy to a life-enriching economy. Now, everything on the left-hand side is what Gus Speth was talking about as selfishness, greed, and apathy. And actually, that is caused not because we are fundamentally selfish, greedy, and apathetic, it's because of the game we are playing. It is the colonial game of growth, or the caterpillar's game of growth, that's causing it. Because what do we tell every corporation? You have to grow your revenues. In fact, if you don't grow your revenues, we fire the CEO who didn't grow the revenues. So every company, every corporation, whether it's pharmaceutical corporation or a big meat corporation or a chemical corporation, they all want to grow their revenues. Media company wants to grow their revenues. So how do they do this? By addicting us, getting us addicted to destructive behaviors. And if you look at who owns all these major corporations, you will find the same 4 financial holding companies: Fidelity, Vanguard, BlackRock, and State Street. Okay? And if we try to see who owns these 4 financial holding companies, you'll discover that they are all private holding companies, and therefore their ownership is a secret. They don't have to disclose it. So we have this unknown number of people who own these 4 financial holding companies who are literally controlling the whole economy of the planet. Okay? And we are pretending to be doing good things. We are pretending to be fighting with each other, and all this politics is just a game that we are playing. But literally, we are just, both sides are just trying to grow. Okay, so it's the same game of growth that we play. And why do we do this? Is because of how we create money. And this is not something that we invented. I mean, it has been, this is something that we inherited from our ancestors. This fractional reserve money game was invented sometime in the 16th century or something, right? So in this game, when you deposit money in a bank, the bank only has to keep a small reserve. Like 10% reserve means it only keeps $10 for the $100 you deposit. And then it lends out the other $90 as a loan to someone. And then it tells the person, you return back that money that I lent you, and along with it, return the interest. Okay, so, but it tells the guy who deposited the $100, I still have your $100. If you want to take it back, I'll give it to you, even though it only kept $10. Okay, now when this $90 comes back into the bank, only $9 is kept, another $81 is loaned out. So from the original $100, the bank has magically loaned out about $900. And then it wants interest on this loan. So it forces the person who borrowed the money to actually compete with someone else in order to get the interest, or we all agree to grow the economy, to grow our footprint. That's how we can keep this money game growing. Okay. And this money game, how do you earn a living? So you talk about you have to earn a living. So you start off with zero. You start off with the society telling you don't belong. Okay. If you want to belong, you have to earn a living in the game. How do you do that? Well, you can go stand in a street corner and beg, or you can go borrow money from a bank. If you have a good idea, they'll give it to you. Or you have to work for someone, so you become a slave. Or you have to get creative and come up with an idea for which the bank is willing to give you money. Okay? And then you make money off of that idea, and then you become the banker. So this is like a game in which we are all trying to get to the top, where we become the one who's loaning the money. And this is what we interpreted to be the American way of life. So when President George H.W. Bush went to the UN and he said, the American way of life is non-negotiable, the UN basically abandoned those 3 major environmental problems and started focusing on how do we maintain this consumer economy. But George H.W. Bush also said, think of every challenge we face. The solution to each is education. And in this case also, the solution is education. Because what is the American way of life? There is a culture, and then there is a civilization. Culture is what we in the engineering world call a specification of the American way of life. And civilization is what we call the implementation of the American way of life. So the culture, in the Declaration of Independence, we say all men are created equal. Well, we now know it's not just all men, it's all men, women, children, and I want to include all beings are created equal. So we know we have this equality as part of our culture. But what have we implemented? We have created one of the most unequal societies in human history. And in the Declaration of Independence, we talk about the inalienable right to life. And then we talk about earning a living in the implementation. What does earning a living mean? Earning a living means that you have no right to life unless you're doing what someone with money wants you to do. That's what earning a living means. So it's the exact opposite of the inalienable right to life. We talk about right to liberty, and then we put people in jail. And there is institutionalized slavery happening, okay, within these jails. From the pursuit of happiness, it is the addiction of desires, right? It's consumerism of satisfaction of desires. So our corporations are literally trying to get all of us addicted to certain behaviors so that we keep coming back for more of their products. So from Dr. Martin Luther King's dream, we have the caged migrant kid's nightmare. So our implementation is the exact opposite of our specification. And when that happens, it's usually because we haven't taken into account reality. See, that's what Richard Feynman said when he examined why the Challenger blew up. He said, for a successful technology, which is true for civilization, reality must take precedence over public relations, for nature cannot be fooled. We can't lie our way into a sustainable civilization. We have to tell the truth. When we say we are doing something, we have to actually implement it. And Buckminster Fuller said, if you want to teach people a new way of thinking, don't bother trying to teach them. Instead, give them a tool or a game, the use of which will lead to new ways of thinking. And that is the new Aquarius money game that we've been working on. So it's a game in which money flows from the bottom up as opposed to being created from the top down. Okay? Because what is money? Money really is a measure of my time and my resources, my knowledge. What do I use that for? What do I use my time for? So I base that on, and then based on what I do, I want someone else to do something else for me. Okay, that's how we exchange services, right? So since money is a measure of my time and my resources, it should flow from me to others, as opposed to being given from some unknown people and trickle down to us in the form of loans. Okay? So this is a game in which we tell people you belong as you are to start with. So it is the same flow rate to the heart of all individuals in this money game. And it promotes a mindset of abundance and radical equality. So money flows into the heart of our account. And then from there, some of it flows into the pocket of our account, which is what we get to use. So the flow rate of the pocket is regulated by acts of compassionate service. So if you do acts of compassionate service, you are able to tap more from the heart into your pocket. Okay? And then some of that also flows directly into the community chest because every one of us belongs to a community. So this is the automatic tax we pay for belonging to this community. And this flow rate is regulated by activity of the individual. So meaning if the individual is sitting there idle, then the heart fills up and then more and more flows into the community chest. So they pay more tax if they're just sitting around doing nothing. Now, what do these tokens represent? They represent a measure of our ecological footprint. So I was looking at this as an engineer and saying, okay, we have a certain ecological allowance for human beings on the planet. And how do we make sure that we all stay within that? So we all stay within the donut of Kate Raworth's donut economics. This is the way I would implement it. Okay? And how do you earn money in this game? Well, by doing acts of compassion to other human beings, to the earth, to animals, or to be creative. You can get more. But this all has to be based on an open source economy and ecology. It's not about owning our ideas and trying to make money off our ideas. It's about donating your ideas. So it's all open source economy and ecology. And that's where I think we are all headed towards. See, if you look at the current money game, which is causing all the problems that I show on the left-hand side of this transformation, versus Aquarius, Aquarius automatically implements everything on the right-hand side of this greatest transformation in human history. But it has to be based on science and the truth. When we measure our ecological footprint, it has to be based on accurate measurements. So this way, when we accumulate our ecological footprint calculations, we don't exceed the limits of the planet, right? So this is why it has to be based on science and the truth. So we have to really look at this as if we are engineering spaceship Earth and how do we live on spaceship Earth. So economic activity in the current system is motivated by fear, because if you don't do that activity, you're going to starve to death. Whereas economic activity in the new system will be based on purpose, because we are the climate regulator species. We have a job to do in the ecosystem. But we must choose to play the new game. Because even in the Bhagavad Gita, which is the gospel of action, after giving Arjuna all that advice, Lord Krishna tells him, I love you so much that I set you free even from me, and you're free to choose. This is why I say it has to be done from choice. And the second proposal that we reached consensus on during the recent conference was that Rather than focusing on SDG number 8, which is about economic growth, which is what the current system is doing, we need to focus on SDG number 2, which is zero hunger. So unite around the implementation of SDG number 2 by making healthy, immune-boosting vegan food freely available to every human being on the planet. Okay? So when we do that, then we will accomplish something. This is the lowest hanging goal among all the UN SDG goals. We'll accomplish something, and then we'll be on track to meeting all the other goals. Because right now the UN is saying we're going to meet all the 17 SDG goals by 2030, and they're all focusing on SDG number 8, which we know is not going to do it, right? And so we reached a consensus on this as well. Proposal 2 was to implement the Food Healers Initiative as a continuing project. And everyone said, yep, let's do it. Let's pull our resources together to make this happen.
So
Finally,
Doctor, I just want to add something. This is so fascinating and so much important information for students to grapple with. To make sure we have like enough time for the Q&A, given our 1:30 end time and providing a short break.
Yeah. I'm done. I'm almost done.
Okay, sorry. I just wanted to make sure because I know they're going to have tons of questions. So
yeah. I'm almost done.
Thank
so
you.
Then, in any new world that you're creating, you have to have a new constitution, and new institutions, new infrastructure, and a new currency. So I've gone through the new currency, the new institutions, the new infrastructure that we need to build. Now the constitution, what is the new constitution? And so Codes for a Healthy Earth is something that Jan Golding and Shelley Ostroff have been working on. It is signed by lots of NGOs, organizations, and it begins with a simple observation that the only legitimate purpose of governance is to protect and cultivate the health and vitality of the planet and all its inhabitants for generations to come. So it's called codes.earth, and you can go to codes.earth and look it up. And it has some simple principles on what we start with. And so the third proposal we adopted was to adopt Codes for a Healthy Earth and the 7 core shifts as the foundation for Vegan World 2026. And this also we reached consensus on it. So to me, this is the Khadi movement, in the 21st century. See, if you look at the Khadi movement in the 20th century, where Gandhi convinced people of India to change their clothes, and he told people, I consider it my duty to induce people by every honest means to wear khadi. At first, people laughed at him. You're going to take on the mightiest empire the world has ever seen by changing your clothes? How is that possible? But by 1930, everyone in India was wearing khadi clothes, and the British government was on its knees begging to negotiate with Gandhi. That was how powerful that movement was. The same with the moon landing, right? And Kennedy said, we go to the moon by the end of this decade. People laughed at him. They thought it was impossible. But it inspired the people of America. And by 1969, man was on the moon. Okay. So we had to first believe it could be done, and then we got it done. The same with the internet. Okay. In 1995, there was an article in Newsweek saying the internet is going nowhere. And I was working on this at that time. And I thought maybe I'm wasting my time. But then we made the internet very robust. And by 2003, I overheard someone say, I cannot live without the internet. That's how fast the uptake of the internet was. Same with gay marriage. In 2005, gay marriage was vetoed by California, the most liberal state in the country. Okay? And by 2015, it was the law of the land. So it again was an exponential transformation that happened. So the vegan movement in 2015, I made this presentation to the climate science community saying that if the world goes vegan, we can literally reverse climate change. We can actually sequester 265 gigatons of carbon, and we've only added 240 gigatons of carbon to the Earth's atmosphere since 1750. And they all said, yeah, you're right, but it'll never happen, right? It'll never happen. Well, it started happening. There was a 7x growth in the number of vegans between 2014 and 2017 in the US, okay? Full 70% of the world population is either reducing meat consumption or leaving meat off the table altogether. This is from Forbes magazine from 2018. So this is why, I made a promise to my granddaughter, a pinky promise, that we will have a vegan world by 2026. And so I wake up every day inspired to meet this promise. So I consider it my duty to induce people by every honest means to go vegan, to paraphrase Mahatma Gandhi. And to me, this is the Khadi movement of the 21st century. So thank you very much. And you can find more information on our website. Carbon Dharma is the first book I wrote, and Carbon Yoga. All these books are available for free. You can read them on climatehealers.org/books. You can check all the facts that I've given at climatehealers.org/facts. And all the climate change information I showed you is in the animal agriculture position paper. And I do talks for people. So I give these talks. And to book a talk, just email this email address. So thank you very much. And let me get out of this. Stop sharing and open for questions.
Thank you so much, Dr.